How can one player create more chances than anyone else on the planet and still be ignored? How can a midfielder carry a global giant on his back and still be called overrated? The answer is simple. His name is Bruno Fernandes, and this is the story of what happens when you're the best playmaker in football and nobody seems to care. For almost a decade, football fans have agreed on one thing. Kevin De Bruyne is the greatest playmaker of his generation. And honestly, that makes sense. Since 2020, De Bruyne has created 437 chances for his teammates. That's an insane number. Behind him are elite names like Kimmich, Calhanoglu, Alexander-Arnold, Havertz, and Thomas Müller. But here's where things get uncomfortable. Thomas Müller, with 339 chances, is still closer to De Bruyne than De Bruyne is to the one player who completely breaks the scale, because Bruno Fernandes has created 111 more chances than anyone else. Read that again. Not second, not close. Miles ahead. And yet, when people talk about the most decisive players of the last 5 years, the names are always the same. Mbappe, Haaland, Kane, Lewandowski, Salah. And then there's this midfielder, whose team nearly got relegated. Still, people roll their eyes when Bruno's name comes up. And let's be honest, we all know why. For years, social media painted him as football's most annoying man. A complainer, a crybaby, a guy who waves his arms, shouts at refs, and loses the ball trying risky passes. Search his name long enough, and you'd see insults instead of praise. But here's the part most people never stop to think about. What if he has to take risks? What if Bruno knows something we don't? Over the years, Bruno's teammates were almost twice as likely to score from chances created by others than from his own. In other words, average passes didn't work at Manchester United. Only perfect ones did. And when you realize that, his desperation makes sense. Because without him, things would have been far worse. United didn't survive because they were good. They survived because someone kept pulling a rabbit out of the hat. And Bruno Fernandes was the only magician in the room. Yes, he misplaces more passes than most midfielders. More than 92% of them, in fact. But look at everything else. His numbers look like something straight out of a video game. Goals, assists, pressing, distance covered, chances created. It raises a serious question. What if Bruno Fernandes is a generational talent, trapped inside the most dysfunctional big club in the world? Because anyone in that position would lose their mind. Watching a historic club sink, seeing teammates walk around like nothing matters, knowing you're giving everything while others look comfortable losing, especially when football was never guaranteed for you in the first place. How Bruno sacrificed everything to become a footballer? Bruno Fernandes' journey was never smooth. At just 10 years old, he was scouted by FC Porto. A dream for any kid in Portugal, but his parents said no. Not because he wasn't good enough, because they didn't own a car and Porto refused to send transport. So the dream died, or at least, it should have. Instead of quitting, Bruno convinced Boavista to pick him up from Maya, nearly half an hour away. Problem solved. For a while, just as he entered his final academy years, Boavista were forcefully relegated to the 3rd division in a massive match-fixing scandal. The club was fighting bankruptcy. No one was watching the academy. And Bruno was invisible. At 17 years old, in a last desperate move, his brother-in-law contacted a scout in Italy. Bruno left Portugal without ever playing a senior match. New country, new language, no family, and it got worse. Paperwork issues meant he wasn't paid for 8 months. He survived on €50 a week sent by his mother. He barely left his dorm room. Every night, he called his girlfriend in tears, saying he wanted to quit. So, before she even turned 18, she left her country and moved in with him. That changed everything. By November, Bruno was training with the first team. By February, the club was 2 points above relegation, and Bruno became a starter. They lost just 3 games in 20. The president nicknamed him the Maradona of Novara. Suddenly, AC Milan and Juventus were watching. But Bruno refused to sit on a bench again. He chose Udinese. How Di Natale changed Bruno forever. At Udinese, Bruno met Antonio Di Natale. And Di Natale saw something special. He took Bruno under his wing, taught him when to shoot, when to pass, when to wait, when to attack space. He worked on everything, almost like he was saying, "You're special, don't waste it." What? As another late bloomer, Di Natale didn't want Bruno to miss his moment. Once, he publicly criticized him, saying, "He irritates me because he has more ability than any of us, but sometimes he forgets it." That was love. Tough love. When Di Natale retired, Bruno moved on, but it still felt like sideways steps. Until Sporting came calling, and that's when everything exploded. The most overpowered midfielder in Portugal, Bruno Fernandes didn't just dominate Portugal, he broke it. Only 22 days after his Sporting debut, he was called up to the national team. In his first season, Player of the Month 3 times, Young Player of the Month 6 times. He led Sporting to cup finals and nearly to the Champions League. Then came one of the darkest moments in Portuguese football history. Armed ultras broke into the training ground. Players were attacked with steel bars and knives. Bruno immediately sent his family away for safety. One by one, players terminated their contracts. But Bruno stayed. When everyone expected Sporting to collapse, he delivered 32 goals and 18 assists. A record for a midfielder in European football. He became captain, won both domestic cups, dragged Sporting back into the Champions League. Clubs circled. Sporting begged. Eventually, Manchester United moved, and football changed overnight. How Bruno shocked the Premier League? United were 7th when he arrived. Within weeks, everything felt different. He won Player of the Month and Goal of the Month together. Twice, he led a 14-match unbeaten run, carried United into the Champions League, won Europa League Golden Boot, won Player of the Year after arriving mid-season. By October, he was named captain. In 2020 alone, he won more Player of the Month awards than every other player combined. United even topped the league in January. He looked unstoppable, but momentum faded. Finals were lost. Legs were tired. And then came the storm. The character assassination. With Ronaldo's return, expectations exploded. Then everything collapsed. Managers were sacked. Form dropped. Results vanished. Even in his worst season, Bruno finished as Champions League top assist provider. For Portugal, he thrived. For United, he was blamed. After a 7-0 loss to Liverpool, legends demanded his captaincy be stripped. They said he wasn't a fighter. Yet he played more minutes than anyone in world football, ran more than anyone in the Premier League, created over 25% of United's expected goals. Leadership isn't silence. Sometimes leadership is caring too much. Eventually, even his harshest critics admitted they were wrong. How Bruno saved United from relegation. This past season, United reached the final day with 38 points. A loss would have meant their worst finish since 1931. Bruno delivered 37 goal contributions. But more than that, he defended, pressed, tracked back. He became the only Premier League player averaging 2 tackles, 1.5 chances created, 2 shots, 30 pressures per game. He carried them again in Europe, scored, assisted, dragged them to finals, and still people shrugged. They called him Mr. Europa League, as if that was an insult. Because when you're the best playmaker on the planet, when you give everything, when you never stop running, sometimes football doesn't reward you with applause. Sometimes it just asks for more. If you enjoyed this breakdown and respect players who give everything for the badge, drop a like, it really helps the channel. And if you love deep football stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.